In a small laboratory in Idaho, a 21-year-old farm boy sketched a design that would change humanity forever, yet today his name remains erased from the history books that celebrate the invention of television. While the world credits corporate giants and wealthy industrialists, the true architect of the electronic television system vanished into obscurity, his revolutionary patents stolen, his life destroyed by those who sought to claim his genius as their own. This is the story of Philo Farnsworth, the forgotten father of television, and the greatest intellectual theft in technological history. Born in 1906 in a log cabin in Utah, Philo Taylor Farnsworth grew up in a world without electricity, plowing fields behind horse-drawn equipment and reading by candlelight. His family moved to rural Idaho when he was 11, and for the first time, the young boy experienced the miracle of electric power flowing through wires. While other children played, Philo studied electrical diagrams and science magazines, teaching himself advanced physics and mathematics that most university students struggled to comprehend. At 14 years old, while plowing straight furrows in his father's potato field, inspiration struck with devastating clarity. The parallel lines cut by the plow reminded him of how an image could be transmitted electronically, line by line, through a vacuum tube, then reassembled on a glowing screen. He rushed to his high school teacher, Justin Tolman, and sketched his vision on a blackboard, a complete electronic television system that would use no mechanical parts, only electrons dancing through vacuum tubes at the speed of light. If you want to discover more forgotten geniuses who changed the world but were erased from history, subscribe now and activate the notification bell. Every week, we reveal the untold stories of brilliant minds who deserved recognition but received only betrayal and obscurity. At 18, Philo enrolled at Brigham Young University, but his family's poverty forced him to abandon his studies after just 1 year. He worked odd jobs, drove a delivery truck, and married his teenage sweetheart Elma Gardner, who would become his lifelong collaborator and the only person who truly believed in his vision. In 1926, at age 19, Farnsworth convinced two philanthropist investors from San Francisco to fund his research with $6,000. He moved to California, set up a small laboratory, and began building the device that existed only in his mind, working 18-hour days, sleeping on a cot between workbenches covered with glass tubes and electrical components. On September 7, 1927, in a cramped lab on Green Street, Philo Farnsworth successfully transmitted the first electronic television image, a simple horizontal line that appeared on a small glowing screen. His financial backers stood in the dim laboratory, watching the flickering image, and one asked when they would see something they could understand. Farnsworth turned to them with quiet confidence and said the magic was not in the image but in the method of transmission itself. The young inventor had achieved what the greatest minds in corporate laboratories said was impossible. While giants like RCA poured millions into mechanical television systems using spinning discs and mirrors, Farnsworth had leapfrogged the entire industry with his elegant electronic solution. His image dissector tube captured light and converted it into electrical signals that could travel through space and be reconstructed instantly on a cathode ray screen. By 1928, he was demonstrating live television transmission to astonished journalists and scientists, showing moving images of his wife Elma, a dollar sign, and other simple shapes that proved his system worked flawlessly. Then came the predators in suits. David Sarnoff, the ruthless president of the Radio Corporation of America, heard rumors of a farm boy who had invented working television in a tiny San Francisco laboratory. RCA had invested millions in mechanical television and held hundreds of patents on obsolete technology that would be worthless if Farnsworth's electronic system became the standard. In 1930, Sarnoff visited Farnsworth's laboratory personally, examined the revolutionary equipment, and made an offer to buy the patents for $100,000. Farnsworth refused. He wanted recognition and royalties, not a one-time payment that would erase his name from history. Sarnoff left the small laboratory that day with a smile, but behind the facade, he was already planning to destroy the young inventor who dared to challenge his empire. RCA launched a systematic campaign to crush Philo Farnsworth, deploying teams of corporate lawyers to challenge every patent, funding propaganda claiming RCA's own employee Vladimir Zworykin had invented television, and using their media connections to write Farnsworth out of the narrative. Zworykin himself had visited Farnsworth's laboratory in 1930, claiming he wanted to learn from the brilliant inventor, but in reality, he was gathering technical details to copy for RCA. When Zworykin returned to RCA, he admitted privately that Farnsworth's system was far superior, but Sarnoff ordered him to replicate the design anyway. Ethics be damned. The patent battles dragged through federal courts for years, draining Farnsworth's finances and energy while RCA's unlimited resources ground him down through legal attrition. In 1935, a crucial moment arrived that should have vindicated the forgotten inventor. Justin Tolman, Farnsworth's high school teacher from Idaho, testified in patent court and produced the original blackboard sketch from 1922, proving conclusively that Philo Farnsworth had conceived the complete television system years before anyone at RCA. The federal judges ruled in Farnsworth's favor, confirming his priority of invention and the validity of his patents. For a brief moment, justice seemed possible, recognition seemed within reach. But David Sarnoff and RCA simply ignored the court ruling and continued manufacturing television sets using Farnsworth's patents without paying licensing fees. They used their political connections and media empire to promote the fiction that RCA had invented television, commissioning publicity photographs of Zworykin holding television equipment and writing press releases that erased Farnsworth from the story. Meanwhile, Farnsworth struggled to manufacture his own televisions, but without RCA's distribution networks and marketing budgets, he couldn't compete in the marketplace he had created. By 1939, when RCA unveiled television sets to huge crowds at the New York World's Fair, most Americans believed the technology was an RCA innovation, and the name Philo Farnsworth was already fading into historical obscurity. World War II brought a temporary pause to the commercial television industry as factories converted to military production. Farnsworth contributed to the war effort, developing radar systems and other classified technologies, his genius redirected toward destruction rather than the communication tool he had envisioned would unite humanity. When the war ended in 1945, the television boom exploded across America, with millions of families purchasing the magical devices that brought moving pictures into their living rooms. But Farnsworth's crucial patents expired in 1947, just as the industry was taking off, and he never received the financial rewards or public recognition he deserved for inventing the technology. The bitter injustice destroyed him from within. Philo Farnsworth sank into severe depression, turned to alcohol to numb the pain of being erased from history, and suffered a nervous breakdown that required hospitalization. His wife Elma watched helplessly as the brilliant mind that had imagined television at age 14 slowly unraveled under the weight of corporate betrayal and historical amnesia. Farnsworth moved from project to project, working on nuclear fusion research and other advanced technologies, but nothing brought the same joy or success as his television invention. He became increasingly reclusive, avoiding publicity and rarely speaking about his role in creating the technology that was transforming global culture. In 1969, Philo Farnsworth watched the Apollo 11 moon landing on a television set in his modest living room, the same technology he had invented 42 years earlier now transmitting live images from the surface of another world. His wife asked if he regretted inventing television, given all the pain it had brought him. He watched the grainy footage of astronauts walking on the lunar surface and said this moment made it all worthwhile, that television had finally fulfilled its promise to bring humanity together in shared wonder. 3 months later, on March 11, 1971, Philo Taylor Farnsworth died at age 64 from pneumonia, his brilliant mind finally at rest after decades of fighting for recognition that never came. The obituaries were brief and buried on inside pages. Most Americans had no idea who he was or what he had given to the world. David Sarnoff died later that same year, celebrated as a media visionary and credited with inventing television, the lie he had promoted for 4 decades finally carved into history as truth. It would take another generation before historians and technology scholars began uncovering the real story, finding the patent documents, the court testimony, the laboratory notebooks that proved beyond doubt that Philo Farnsworth was the true father of television. Today, more than 50 years after his death, small efforts have been made to restore his legacy. A statue stands in the United States Capitol representing Utah, his boyhood home. A few documentary films have told his story to limited audiences. His name appears in some history textbooks, though usually as a footnote to the RCA narrative. But billions of people who watch television every day have no idea they're using a technology invented by a farm boy from Idaho who sketched his vision in a potato field at 14 and saw it stolen by corporate titans who valued profit over truth. The story of Philo Farnsworth is not just about one man's tragedy, it's a warning about how powerful institutions rewrite history to serve their interests, how genius without resources is vulnerable to exploitation, and how the brilliance of forgotten inventors is erased to glorify the wealthy industrialists who stole their work. Every time you turn on a screen, remember the young inventor who imagined it first, who fought for recognition, who died in obscurity while others claimed his crown. His revolutionary vision changed the world forever, even if the world refuses to remember his name.